I'm going to hold off on calling the Budget Subcommittee to order until such time as that language has arrived.
I'm stepping behind it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could ask you all to take your places so that we could call the Budget Subcommittee to order, would appreciate that. Sergeant at Arms, if you'd lend us some assistance in that regard.
Take a seat, please. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. This is the Senate Budget Subcommittee number 2. We are in informational session at the moment in order to discuss, at least initially, Senate Bill number 2 in the 7th extraordinary session. And before we begin, I want to ask our staff if you will call the roll, please.
Senator Simitian.
Here.
Senator Benoit.
Here.
Senator Lowenthal.
Here.
Quorum has been established. All members of the committee are present. Senator Cogdill, my understanding is that we are receiving a mock-up of your Senate Bill number 2, which reflects changes to the language of the bill since the bill was heard in a joint policy hearing in this very room last Wednesday afternoon. Is that correct?
My understanding.
All right. Then what I would like to suggest with the concurrence of the committee members is that we conduct the informational hearing with some degree of focus and ask both you and any witnesses who might like to speak to focus exclusively on the changes to the bill since we heard it in a joint policy hearing just last Wednesday in its previous form. So if we could ask both you and any witnesses to limit your comments to, obviously, budget issues, since this is a budget subcommittee, and then even more focused on the changes since last Wednesday, I think that would help us cover everything we need to cover, but do it in a timely fashion. Is that acceptable? Great. Thank you very much. Then why don't I ask you, Senator Cogdill, to walk us through the changes and help us understand the implications of those changes and or the rationale for them in terms of their budget implications. And then we welcome, of course, other members of the Senate who are here to join the Budget Subcommittee.
Great.
Proceed.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if we could ask the Sergeant at Arms for some help with the microphones. There we go.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just try to focus again on, as you point out, the changes that have been made since last Wednesday when we presented the bill. There are amendments being prepared now, and we expect that Council will be finished with those amendments within the hour. Overall, the amount of the bond has increased. It was at $9.4 billion. It's now $9.99 billion. The increases reflect negotiations that have taken place since last Wednesday, dealing with certain areas of concerns relating to needs throughout the state and input that we have received from both the Assembly Democrats and Republicans, as well as some additional information that's come in from some of the Democrat folks in the Senate. We've changed the definition of economically distressed areas to address the concerns of the environmental justice community. If you'll remember when we presented the bill last, there were some issues concerning that. We have, again, negotiated that, cleaned that up, I think, to everybody's liking. We've amended the area of origin language, which hopefully will remove opposition at the end of the day. This has always been a very contentious portion of the bond language, and originally when we were working on this particular section of the bond, I think we negotiated for close to a year to finally come up with what we thought at that point in time was acceptable language. This was before any of the policy bills that we're now dealing with had even come into play. And I think that the feeling now is that it would be best if we could figure out a way to do it to deal with this particular issue within the policy bills and ultimately refer to the area of origin issues in the bond rather than have separate language in the bond. But again, that as of this point has not come completely together yet. But we have been continuing to work on it and we'll continue to do that. The bond as it now exists creates a new Chapter 5 at $355 million for drought relief. which funds drought relief projects and provides funding to address the economic impact of the ongoing drought. The new language increases the amount in the allocated IRWM section by $100 million and changed the formula to spread out the money more evenly among population bases. This was one of the issues that was raised in the last hearing. We went back and reviewed the formula that had been applied and have made what we believe to be very equitable adjustments to that. Also increased funding for Delta communities and the impact on agriculture that's perceived from the improvements that are contemplated in the Delta. The new language excludes a reference in Chapter 8 to the funding of Shasta Reservoir. That was a concern that has been removed. New language increases the amount available in Chapter 9 for conservation and wastewater protection projects. The projects funded represent a merge of our prior bonds and the projects funded in those prior to Steinberg and the Caballero bonds. Chapter 10, groundwater has been increased to $500 million, and Chapter 11, the recycling chapter, has been increased by $500 million, and all of that adds up to $9.99 billion in the new bond.
Thank you very much, Senator Cogdill. Very concise and yet very thorough. Let me ask first if there are questions. Well, Finance and LAO, do you want to come forward at this point? And while you're coming up, let me ask if there are questions from either the two members of the Budget Subcommittee as these folks are coming up. Senator Lowenthal, Senator Benoit. All right. Let's hear then from Finance and from the LAO. And I'm going to ask Finance and the LAO to limit any comments they might like to offer to the changes that are contained in the mock-up, which Senator Cogdill has just walked us through. Then what I'm going to do is go back to the committee and ask if there are questions, as well as to other members of the Senate who are at the dais. And then once we've completed that exercise, we're going to see if there are members of the public who would like to speak in order to raise issues, again, limited to the fiscal issues and limited to the changes that are before us today. From the Department of Finance, who's here to speak for the Department of Finance?
Mr. Chair, this is Karen Finn with the Department of Finance. Just quickly looking at the changes that Mr. Cogdill is reporting, and also then the cash impact. That's very important. That's what drives the debt service. According to what the Department of Water Resources just handed out to us, it looks like there is minimal impact in the certainly the first 4 years of the bond act. It looks like it kind of nets out to almost no increase, with the increased $500 million really coming, looks like, out and about 16, 17 on out. So I know in your agenda we shared with you our estimates of the projected debt service based on the assumptions the Department of Water Resources gave us. I also just want to add, and your staff and the LAO have also done some summaries for you, that just as a reminder, all those projections that we have that have been published out for 5 and 10 years are based on summaries that the state agencies give to us on how they think their programs are going to roll out over the next few years. So I just want to remind you that those are state agencies' ideas. You, as the legislature, will have the prioritization and the ability to appropriate those at the level they estimate right now. Second of all, I just wanted to kind of, let's see, my other point was, a couple points here. Prioritization. Oh, just the impact of this water bond that we are talking about, the way the departments estimate it going out, it's going to have a modest impact no matter where we are in our debt service for the first few years of its program. And as again, just to summarize, that you, the legislature, will have probably the majority of the funds to appropriate, as you see over the next few years. Only a small part of it is continuously appropriated.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from members of the Department of Finance staff? If not, LAO, again, focusing please on fiscal matters, fiscal committee, and changes since the bill was heard in its previous form just this last Wednesday. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Catherine Freeman, and this is Jason Dickerson, and we can answer questions for you. We would echo the comments of the Department of Finance, and we actually have no comments at this time unless you have questions. before us.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to members of the Budget Subcommittee. Questions, if any, from Senator Lowenthal or Senator Benoit? Senator Lowenthal. Senator Benoit. Thank you. All right, we're good. Other members of the Senate who have joined us here at the dais, and we welcome Senators Pavley and Leno and Ducheney, the chair of the Full Budget Committee. Senator Pavley, you have a comment or a question?
I think just for point of clarification, on page 8, the Mountain Counties overlay, $44 million, is that still part of the package, Senator Cogdell? And if you could explain that.
Yes, they are still part of the package. They are not, however, allowed to access any of the monies that have been allocated for the Sacramento River or the San Joaquin River hydrological regions.
Who is the mountain? Who are the mountain counties?
It's Tuolumne, Calaveras, Amador. I don't know who. It's basically, all the way down the foothills of the Sierras, I think. But those are the three that I know. Mariposa, I think, is in there.
Any other questions, Senator Pavley?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Senator Leno, anything at this time? Senator Ducheney, anything at this time? If not, what I'm going to do is ask if there are members of the public who would like to testify. If we could ask the LAO to just swing around the table, and let's make spaces at those 4 seats at the front, please. We'll ask folks to line up. Department of Finance, you just stay right where you are. That'll be good. And let's ask folks to step up. And again, I'm going to ask the witnesses to limit their remarks. And do we want to... Are you going to do this in support and opposition? Does that work for the witnesses who are here? Okay, we're going to start with witnesses in support on the bond measure. So if, forgive me for not clarifying that, if that means you want to vacate the premises for a moment, that's okay. Witnesses in support. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each witness to limit their remarks to 1 minute, rather than ask a couple of folks to do 2 minutes and then have everybody else just sort of get stuck with name and organization. I'd like to ask you to just remember topic sentence from when you were a high school English student, okay? Topic sentence. Go straight to your 1 minute, and again, focused on financial issues as a fiscal committee and on the changes since last Wednesday, which is the reason for the hearing today. Let's start right here and we'll work our way down.
Mr. Chairman, Ed Manning, on behalf of Westlands Water District, in strong support. We were in support of the previous version and support of this version, and let others address more of the substance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Ron Davis with the Association of California Water Agencies. We have been a strong supporter of Senator Cogdell's comprehensive package for funding local resource development for short-term improvements in the water system, as well as the long-term funding needs in terms of Chapter 6, or 7 and 8 for storage and the Bay Delta conservation planning process. We continue to support his measure vigorously.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman and members, Dave Puglia, Western Growers Association. I'll echo Mr. Davis's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And folks, if you could all speak right up, please, that would be helpful to members of the committee. Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Glenn Farrell with the Defiant Water Authority. We've long been supportive of Mr. Cogdell's efforts. Appreciate his leadership in this issue, and we remain strongly supportive today.
Thank you very much.
No, I have this.
Next
Good
witness.
evening. Thad Bettner, General Manager, Glen Inclusive Irrigation District. We support the changes as modified by Senator Cogdell. We support also storage sections that are identified in the section, and also off budget, but just wanted to endorse the changes to the area of origin language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Dennis Albiani on behalf of the Lucid.
It's on. You just need to pull it a little closer if you could.
Got it. That's the first time nobody's ever heard me. Dennis Albiani on behalf of the Tehama-Coosa Canal Authority, as well as several agricultural organizations, including California Grain and Feed Association. We support and have long supported Mr. Cogdell's bond as part of a comprehensive water package. We do feel necessary to also discuss, though, that the other legs of this stool are pretty shaky at this point and not adequate. Some of the policy bills, but we definitely support the bond and look forward to working on that and continuing to push that through.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Richard Harris, on behalf of the Water Reuse Association, and today, in collaboration with these 9 other entities, we sent around a memo related to the recycled water funding, asking for an increase to $1 billion. Senator Cogdill did not address the issue of the earmarks, which I was hoping he was going to. We're support if amended, if those things happen. The other agencies include City of Anaheim, the California Municipal Utilities Association, Central Basin Community Water District, Eastern Municipal, Inland, Irvine, Ranch, Sonoma, and West Basin, and we support what the big city mayor has asked for.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Question from Senator Ducheney.
If I heard you correctly last week, although I was watching it on television in Senator Pavley's meeting, you all asked for $500 million for recycling and $500 for groundwater, which now Senator Cogdill has met. This week you're up the ante to $1 billion?
We did not ask for any groundwater money. I don't know who was asking.
Just the water recycling. But last week's number was $500.
No, it was $1 million they asked for.
This was just recycled water, and the piece that we're supporting
including the conservation.
No, we're not on the conservation part.
Just
water reuse is the state's recycled water producers, and we're just on the water recycling, and we think that the need out there that's been shown and documented, and I won't take the time here, was $1 billion.
Just quickly on the issue.
But he upped it $250 million since last week, and I just think people ought to acknowledge that they've moved in the direction that you said, even if they couldn't accommodate it, stay under $10 billion.
Absolutely thankful for Senator Cogdill increasing it up to $500 million, which is what's in the Assembly version as well. Thank you.
Just wanted to speak quickly to the carve-out issue. That has been removed.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to know about.
The 40%.
The 40%.
40% carve-out's gone, and the number has been doubled since last week, and they're still trying to keep the total under $10 billion. Hard to do otherwise.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Chair and members, Jay Hance with the State Building Trades Council. We still stand in support of the bond. However, with the discussions I've had with a lot of the Assembly members, there's a significant misunderstanding about how this money is allocated, and the votes, frankly, I don't believe are there right now, and I think that you may consider, and we would support linking the policy to the passage of the bond. We would like to see both of those be moved together. It's difficult to do the policy without the bond. We think that they need to be tied together, and there needs to be a lot of work done on the other house, or otherwise I think we're spinning our wheels.
Thank you very much. Next
Mr. Chairman, members, Mike Dillon, representing the California Association of Sanitation Agencies and Major Wastewater Agencies. Our understanding is that there's not $500 million for water recycling per se. I hope we're wrong. I think it's $250 for recycling and $250 for water conservation and efficiency.
All right, well, why don't we all stop for a moment and sort that out? So let's start with anything else that, Mr. Dillon?
No, just supportive of additional money for water recycling. $500 million would be great.
Okay, and then let me go to Senator Cogdill, who is the author. One moment, please, Senator Ducheney. Senator Cogdill?
There's currently $500 million in Chapter 11 for recycling.
Yes.
And $250 for conservation.
Thank you very much.
Great.
That's
Glad
great.
we got that clarified. Next witness, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Danny Merkley with the California Farm Bureau. We believe that the bond is an essential component of a comprehensive package, and we're supportive of the direction that the Senator is going, and would like to echo Mr. Albiani's comments about the policy piece and some of the areas that need to be addressed there.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Valerie Nera for the California Chamber of Commerce. We have been supportive of Senator Cogdill's bill all along and looked at these amendments are favorable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Brent Walthall, Kern County Water Agency, in support of the bill, but would like to know if we could restore the $50 million for the fish and wildlife and recreation facilities at state water projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Cogdill, you can respond to that if you like when we get a little farther, or you want to do that right now?
Sure, we'll look at it again, but we've been over these numbers, and as Senator Ducheney said, the goal has always been to try to keep this thing under $10 billion. So,
okay,
it's pretty hard to make any further adjustments at this point.
All right, at 9.99, you think you're just not a lot of wiggle room. All right. Anyone else would like to be a witness in support? Witnesses in opposition? Let me ask witnesses in opposition come forward, and if I could ask you to be equally concise. Try and do this in a minute each, please, and again, focus on fiscal impacts, since this is a fiscal committee, and on the changes which Senator Cogdill articulated at the outset of the hearing, please. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Provenza, Yolo County Supervisor, also appearing on behalf of Contra Costa, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Solano counties, Delta counties impacted by this package. We thank Senator Cogdill for moving in the right direction.
Excuse me. Sergeant at Arms, could we ask for some quiet in the room, please? It's really tough to hear up here if people are talking in the room. Mr. Provenza, why don't you go ahead and start? We do know which 5 counties you're here for, though. Thank you.
Thank you. We do thank Senator Cogdill for moving in the right direction in terms of funding in the Delta. However, as we indicated in our previous letter in September, it is clearly not enough for Delta sustainability, as well as the impact of these projects on the Delta. We think a minimum of $5 to $6 billion would be necessary to accomplish this. The Delta is being asked to accept the significant risk and subordinate its own well-being to the well-being of the state. We're willing to do that, but there has to be adequate funding. Second, we are very concerned about the lack of linkage in the policy bill to the bond measure. The policy measure should not go forward unless the bond passes. If that were to happen, we would be in a terrible situation in terms of being able to protect the Delta in the future. So we don't think we're there yet and are opposed to this bond measure at this point.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chairman, Alan Davenport with the Service Employees International Union. I can be brief. I heard nothing in Senator Cogdill's presentation that would change our position, which is to be fundamentally opposed to any increase in general fund obligation over the next decade. And I would only point out to the committee that the numbers that you have in front of the analysis that I received here from the Department of Finance are substantially different from the same set of figures for the same years presented by the Treasurer in his report. I mean, they're off by $1.5 billion or $2 billion a year. You might want to take a look at that.
Thank you. And again, a reminder, please stay focused on the changes. Next witness.
Jonas Minton with the Planning Conservation League. One of the changes we see today is an additional $599 million. We don't even have it in print. We have a summary. It seems like a very odd process when we come before your committee and have detailed discussions of items of $500,000. Now we're at $599 million. The total repayment cost of this will significantly hurt the existing ecosystem restoration, environmental protection programs. That money is going to come from someplace. That money is about 1/3 the budget, the annual budget of CSU, or 1/3 the budget of the state college system. That's the scale we're talking about. And we just do not think this is sustainable or will be supported by the voters. We request you not move forward with this package.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Steve Evans, representing Friends of the River. We're not privy to the most recent amendments, so I can't quite comment on those, but I do want to note that Senator Cogdill did not mention that the $3 billion that would be continuously appropriated for storage was changed. And there are policy vehicles here circulating under the legislature that would hand the decision to spend that money to an appointed board, which is essentially the legislature jumping out of the car and let it careen downhill and letting somebody else deal with the financial ramifications of that. We are strongly opposed to this bond. We cannot afford it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our next witness, do we have other copies of the mock-up? I am concerned that we make copies available. They're in the back, so if you're looking for copies of the mock-up and the language and the numbers, they're available.
They're available in the back.
They're available in the back. Thank you very much. All right. And we have more copies on the way, so if they haven't arrived yet, please just be a little patient. All right. Let's have 4 folks in the seats.
Mr. Chairman and members, Jai Sukprasud with the California School Employees Association. We do have a general concern, as has been stated before, the pressure on the general fund. Given the loss to education, the funding in the last couple of budget cycle, we're quite worried about the pressure on the general fund and what the implication would be on the education community when these bonds repayments are in place.
Thank you for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman and members, Barry Broad on behalf of the Sacramento Regional Sanitation District. We have an oppose unless amended position on the bond, although our request is pretty minimal. Well, few dollars here and there. We would like to go back to the Steinberg version in terms of the money that's available for wastewater treatment. So I don't know if you're handing out more money, but if you are, we'd like it to go back to that. But secondly, we have a sort of neither goose nor gander problem, which is to say there is the provision that discusses these wastewater treatment grants, and some of them are described as for entities upstream of the Delta. We literally straddle upstream and in the Delta. We are both, because we discharge into the Delta, and our facilities and most of our people are upstream of the Delta. So we just want some clarification, hopefully, that can be that we qualify, because I think that was the intent. Thank you.
All right. Senator Cogdill, you heard that request?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. We had a...
I'm sure we are.
We're going to let your staff talk to
requests.
Person. There we go. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you for taking the time to hear me this afternoon. My name is Brett Baker on behalf of Restore the Delta. We remain opposed to the bond. We feel that this process has been fatally flawed from the get-go. We don't see any reason to be rushing through such an important issue for the state of California and future generations. Do not feel it's appropriate to be saddling the state and its taxpayers with the debt that would result from this proposal. And yeah, we would encourage you to take the time to address this issue that it deserves, and adjourn and maybe come back in January with some more appropriate language.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Thank you, Senator. Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Metropolitan supports a comprehensive investment strategy for not only the Delta but also statewide and regional local water management. The worsening crisis in the Delta will require a comprehensive approach that will include sound investments within the estuary as well as water management strategies at the regional local level. We appreciate the recognition of how valuable recycling and water conservation and drought relief is to our areas south of the Delta, and we encourage your support for the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Sylvia Solisha on behalf of the Contra Costa Water District. The district remains opposed specifically in regards to the area of origin language. We understand that there have been changes which are in the mock-up, and we look forward to reviewing those and may change our position if the language is suitable. But we appreciate the work put into it thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Martha Guzman, California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. There are a lot of elements that we are have a lot of concerns with and are opposed to, but I'll just highlight one in particular, which is in relation to the amount of funding for safe drinking water and wastewater for poor communities in the state of California who can't drink their water and cannot flush their toilets. And this particular bond, the language now renames the program for the Small Community Wastewater Grant Program, gives the state board the guidelines to establish a new, which would basically take us back 10 years from a point when communities like Malibu were receiving grant money in competition with very poor communities. And this would take us back about 10 years. We need to keep the scarce resources, especially if they're general fund bond monies, to the poorest communities of the state who cannot, again, flush their toilets or drink their water.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if she has seen.
That's what I was going to ask, is whether or not you've seen the most recent language.
I don't know if I have. I just saw what was in it.
We appreciate the concern that's been raised, and I think we've addressed that in the amendment on the language relating to distressed areas.
Senator Cogdill, if I could ask you to highlight what page that is, then what we'll do is we'll ask Ms. Guzman to take a look at copy of the mock-up on page 4.
Page 4.
Page 4.
And there you go.
Well, I'll just say that, we currently I have concerns with distressed, although I don't know what it says.
Less than 85% of median income, financial hardship, unemployment rate 2% higher than the state average, and low population density.
Okay. Currently, the definition is 80% of MHI, and the current definition in statute of disadvantaged community is 80% of MHI, and we're already competing with far too many communities that have economies of scale, perhaps, or that have more economic viability of funding projects on their own. We think, if anything, the MHI threshold should be lowered to 60% of MHI. Assemblymember Arambula carried a bill on this for a definition for severely disadvantaged communities. That should be our focus, the poorest communities in our state, especially when we're just talking about $100 million or $95 million. The need that we know, solicited need that we know of poor communities is over $1 billion. So I think we shouldn't be opening the pool up to wealthier communities. We should be narrowing the pool to the most economically hardship communities.
Ms. Guzman, thank you. Let me just recap where I think we are. We understand the communication you've made, which is that you have a concern about the extent to which this has too wide a range of communities competing for a limited pool of funds. I feel sure you appreciate Senator Cogdale's efforts to address these issues in his amendments. You've indicated to us you wish he had gone farther, and then your judgment, it still isn't acceptable language. Have we got it right?
I would like to see it, though, because the other thing we'd like to make sure is that I believe in one of the versions I saw, and again, I don't know if it's an Assembly version or a Senate version at this point, the Department of Water Resources was being given that authority of how to define all of this. And we think that that definition, that discretion should be, in this particular case for wastewater, given to the State Water Resources Control Board. They're the ones who know these communities. They've been working on this issue forever, and so if we can get anywhere on that end, that would be great as well.
Consider yourself heard. Please take a chance to look at the language in the mock-up of the bill. Thank you. Next witness, please.
Debbie Davis. I'm speaking for the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water and Sierra Club California. And I'll keep my remarks brief and just say that we remain opposed. Again, we believe that a general obligation bond, is not appropriate for the things that we're using it to fund, and that we need to be looking at a sustainable financing plan that leverages our bond funding to also get federal investments, local investments, fees, et cetera, so that we actually have a sustainable plan to fund California water into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chair, members, Rosario Capella on behalf of the California Municipal Utilities Association. Spoke with Senator Cogdale earlier. I understand the earmark has been removed. Have not seen the language, so that's my disclaimer, but we are supportive of increasing the amount to $1 billion on the water recycling pot, but are in support of the bill today. Thank you very much. Let me just check with Sir. Do we have copies here? We do. We have copies of the mock-up. Still running. All right. So have we exhausted all the copies that were at the rear? Okay. Thank you. All right. So we're waiting for additional copies of the mock-up to come, and as soon as they're available, they'll be here. We have additional witnesses. Begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Paul Bauer on behalf of the California Groundwater Coalition. Would like to thank Senator Cogdale and the members for their work in funding for the groundwater piece. We do have other clients that are in the process, as you might understand, of reviewing the language, and so we'd reserve the balance of that to allow people to have an opportunity to weigh in at a later time. If such a time should be available, we'd certainly ask for it. And with that, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Leo Winternitz, Delta Program Director for the Nature Conservancy, and I'm speaking in support of the bond legislation. Whether or not new conveyance is selected down the line, restoration of Delta ecosystems, and for the Delta as a place and for water supply reliability of this state is critical. And by that I mean for water users, I mean both water users north of the Delta and south of the Delta. So for those concerned with the state's water system and who seek funding for infrastructure such as pipes, canals, and dams, consider also that ecosystem restoration is an equally important piece of water infrastructure for this state. Without restoration, it is likely that we will not be able to recover the listed species, and without recovery of listed species, we will not have water supply reliability. So for these reasons, we support the bond legislation.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman and members, Dominic Damari here on behalf of the Northern California Water Association, and I believe that I'm here in support of Mr. Cogdill's bond, as we believe that it is drafted. It has area of origin language in it that is consistent with that submitted by our organization. I need to get confirmation on that, so I leave you with this caveat, which is if it's not consistent with the language that we've submitted, then we won't be in support. But should it be, we are. And so that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
How very existential of you. Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Louis Brown on behalf of the Nisei Farmers League, California Cotton Growers Association. In support of the bond, we want to express our appreciation to Senator Cogdill in the efforts to make this a comprehensive effort to address a number of needs in the water community for agriculture and others, and ask for an aye vote when and if that time ever comes.
All right, thank you. We have asked for witnesses in support and opposition. Some of the support was late in arriving, so we blended the two a little bit here. Senator Cogdill, let me just first see if there's anyone else who would like to testify before the subcommittee.
I had one question just for clarification, when it's appropriate.
Thank you. Senator Cogdill, first let me ask, are there any comments you'd like to make in response to any of the comments we just heard? We did take some of your responses as we went through, but anything else you want to add to that at this point?
No, I don't think so. The concerns that you heard certainly aren't new to us. We've heard these now for literally years, and we have worked very diligently to try to come up with a comprehensive water bond that addresses the concerns to the greatest extent possible and provides us with a comprehensive way forward. We think we've done that. Again, the goal was to try to keep this thing under $10 billion. We've done that. I think you're going to in any given area of the bond, there's folks that are going to want more money in it. That makes sense. But again, I think there is enough in all of the categories, and the allocations have been made in an appropriate way to provide a much improved system over what we have today moving forward.
We go first to members of the Budget Subcommittee. Senator Lowenthal, any questions? Senator Benoit, any questions?
What?
Other members of the Senate, Senator Pavley, and then Senator Ducheney.
Just maybe it's an LAO question. It's just my lack of knowledge on this particular subject. On page 16, it's relating to allocation of funds for surface storage projects. It starts at the bottom there on line 39 and 40 on 16. Identified in the CalFed Bay Delta record decision, it says may be provided for those purposes to local joint powers authorities, and went on to say that it's a combination of non-governmental partners or hydrologic regions. Page 16 and 17, and I just didn't know if that was normal procedure on then who would own the dam and reservoir and who would let contracts. And I didn't know if JPAs were typically the way. And when you're talking about, billions of dollars of monies going out and how they owned and operated and the liability exposure and everything else, let alone auditing for the expenditure of monies.
Senator Pavley, in general, our dams and reservoirs those that are within the state system are owned by the state. Those within the federal system are owned by the feds.
Right.
In terms of locals, I can't answer the question. I don't know if they use the JPA, the Joint Powers Authority, for dam ownership. But if the state were to invest in a dam, one would think that we would be the...
I was just wondering if the $3 billion continuous appropriations that go to dams, although it's mostly ecosystems, I just wanted to be clear in understanding if that's a state responsibility to operate and maintain and let contracts, or whether it should be given to the JPA now that it's a hybrid kind of funding source.
If I understand the question is whether or not the state, in its granting authority, would then take ownership. Say, for example, we gave a grant to a large water district for surface storage. Is that correct?
So if the Water Commission gave a grant, who do they give it to?
Under the the language, if they were to give a grant
to a JPA,
the state might not hold liability, and I don't think I have that.
And they would be the owners of the facility, or
if it's a grant, we don't have to be the owner.
Okay.
But under this language, and I haven't reviewed the language thoroughly, if that changes.
So this is sort of, no pun intended, charting new waters.
And that language has been in every bond that we've had out there. So I mean, it's.
Let me make a suggestion before I go to Senator Duchesne. Do we have Ledge Council here in the room? Then why don't we ask committee staff to get Ledge Council to join us, and let's talk a little with Ledge Council. You raise an important issue and just want to get it resolved to the satisfaction of everybody who's here. So if we can get Ledge Council, please, and let's go to Senator Duchesne.
Well, let me just I'll comment briefly on that, and then I just had another comment to some of the folks that were here. The way I read this, it talks about a joint powers authority, and actually I think it's a good thing because it would limit the state's liability to operate, and mostly it would be, this is really mostly on page 17. I see where she's saying it starts on page 16, but it's really, the heart of the issue is on 17, and it's subsections B and C. And the point is that it would seem like, because most of these, I think it's presumed by everybody that $3 billion doesn't begin to cover the need or the cost of any of these proposed storage facilities, that local districts, and possibly in cooperation, multiple irrigation districts or water districts would be coming together and proposing something, a surface storage or a groundwater storage project. And then that entity would apply to the state for funds under this section for the public benefit portion of said project only. That's the intent of this
up to a maximum,
language as I've understood it.
Up to a maximum of 50% of the total construction
50%.
cost.
So that's why we don't want to be the, and then this says we wouldn't have to be the owners because they would own it because we would be only contributing. But it says that the department becomes an ex officio member of the board if such joint powers authority is using said money, right? So that the department has some say in it, but that they are not, that it wouldn't be the state's project. This is not a state.
I just don't think state bond monies have come to this purpose ever before, and that's why I raised it. It's usually funded.
Again, it's for the public benefit portion that has very defined uses and criteria for that money.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There's Kathy out there. I think Matt probably got some contribution from state bond money for Diamond Valley. I mean, I think there have been storage projects that there was no state funds at all, only for the bones, right? The museum.
Right there.
All right. Well, yeah, okay. Anyway, I just thought perhaps there had been some.
Museum.
There had been some contributions. Anyway, my real comments, Mr. Chairman, if I could take just one more moment. I appreciate people's concern about the general fund, but I think there are 2 or 3 things that mitigate or sort of argue in favor of doing this despite those concerns in the current economy. If our budget were what it ought to be at this time, if our economy had not totally tanked, if our budget had gone on doing what it was doing prior to 2007, we would now be in a place where our debt ratio would be relatively very manageable. Our ratio has gone up because our revenues have gone down. And I think the tension in this discussion is that a lot of both agricultural and manufacturing and other businesses in California who employ people and who help make this economy move are looking to this bond and this package of bills to create stability and reliability in our water system and to demonstrate that the state is addressing that. Seems to me, I mean, there's risk, but basically by moving this package forward, we are moving forward the opportunity for people to feel more comfortable investing in both agricultural and other businesses in California in a way that will bring the economy back to where it needs to be, so that the bond tension, general fund tension that some of the folks spoke to would not be there. I also would suggest that the fact that most of this money can be appropriated upon basically in the budget through legislative action every year. We will have some control over how much of it gets let at any given time in combination with other bonds that are out there and 1B and when projects are ready and all of those things. And to the extent any of this money does get let, as the building trades point out, it's jobs, jobs, jobs. So I think there's a tension here between our fear about the current general fund condition and our desire to move the economy forward. I think this falls on the side of moving the economy forward and hoping that we can, in fact, put ourselves back in a place where the debt ratio will not be a problem.
Thank you, Senator Duchesne. Are there comments from other members of the committee? Are there comments from other members of the Senate? Senator Cogdill, do you have any other comments at this time?
Just, I did receive some other information that speaks to Senator Pavley's concern relating the language on page 17. Evidently, the Los Vaqueros Reservoir and the Kern County Water Bank were both financed with portions of private and state dollars, and I believe this construct here basically represents the same type of JPA situation that they've used.
Thing.
Yeah.
I just raised it because I always thought it was state, federal, and I didn't know there could be locals involved.
Senator Cogdill, we do have someone from the Legislative Counsel's office on their way. What I'd like to suggest, if I may, and if you're agreeable, is that after we recess the committee, which I think we're about to do, that perhaps you take a minute or two to walk through the language with him or her and make sure that it does what it's designed to do, and perhaps share that with Senator Pavley and anyone else who might be interested. But I just think that's the point of a hearing like this, is to let those one more thing kinds of questions be raised. Members, if there's nothing else from LAO or the Department of Finance or from members of the committee, then it would be my inclination to recess the committee at this time. The informational hearing on SB 2 having been completed, we will recess rather than adjourn, so that if we have any other reason to come back into committee, we have the opportunity to do that. Senator Cogdill, I think, unless you've got anything else, I'm just going to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
And appreciate the opportunity to catch up on the latest amendments to Senate Bill number 2. Without objection, we stand in recess.